first step obviously will be to stack them together like we've been doing and then aligning them, right? Now, till now, we have been doing that manually, but since we have a lot of shots this time, we are going to do this in an automated way. So I'm going to open Photoshop. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Scripts. I think I mentioned this last time also in one of the videos. And then you're going to select this option which says Load Files into Stack. Okay. So it's going to ask you which files. You can select all. So these are the 6 shots. So this just makes it easier. There's no difference here. It's just that it makes it easier. Also, it tells you this option, right? Attempt to automatically align source images. So not only will it stack it for us, it will also align it. So it will be 2 steps in one go. Okay, so I'm going to keep this checked and I'm just going to hit OK. It's just going to take a bit of time and it's going to do this all in one step. So you can see starting the process here and it's just going to keep stacking these layers. Now we're going to change the sequence. That is a later step, but first let it stack and align it. So this is that edit auto align. We could have done it manually also, right? So you can see these are all our images here. Okay, by the way, I've given you all the images so you can work along with me. Now we're going to change the sequence a bit here. Now, before I do that, what I always like to do in these shots is, though it's not 100% compulsory because you can see the thumbnail and you can kind of make out where the subject is, but I still, oftentimes as you're going to see, we will have to quickly go to a specific clone, like the position where the specific subject is there. And that time you don't want to be hunting down the layers and seeing and hiding which is the layer. So what I like to do at this point is just give it names, okay? So just very simple names, okay? For example, right now we're seeing this top layer, like, so we can just double click on it and say laptop. So this time I'm working on the laptop, okay? Let's hide this. Let's see which layer is underneath it. So we can call it sleeping close to the camera, right? So just you can give any name. If you want, you can even, some people like to give it names on the basis of, like if you were to imagine this being divided into rule of thirds grids, like 6 sections, you can just name it according to sections also, okay? Completely is up to you how you want to name them. So I want to call it sleeping close to the camera because there are 2 sleeping poses, right? Then we're going to hide this. Let's call it shocked, okay? Let's call this one horns, not horny, oh, sorry, horns. Right, no, it's horns, okay. So what's wrong with my spelling? Okay. And then let's call this sleeping couch. Okay, well, I could have called this sleeping floor, so no problem, doesn't matter. Actually, I'm going to do that. Sleeping floor, okay. And finally, this is the empty scene. This is kind of evident, but still, let's just call it empty, okay. So the empty layer is going to be at the bottom, okay, and the rest of the layers we'll just, now, to be frank, for the rest of the layers, the sequence doesn't matter as long as the 2 layers are, or the 2 subjects, the 2 clones are not intersecting with each other. If they are, then the sequence will become important because the one in which, you know, the subject is on top of the other will have to come on top. For example, okay, so let me just, I'm not able to convey that in words properly, but between sleeping floor and sleeping couch, there is a bit of intersection, right? We took this risk. So if we see this, like one is sleeping here and the other one is this. So it's now this, right? If you see this particular one, it's going to intersect and this is going to be on top of that, right? Because obviously, right? So in this case, it's important that you just make sure that sleeping floor will be on top of sleeping couch. It already was, just, but in this case, yes, because ultimately what's going to happen is that this part of the hair which is touching the leg will be on top of the leg, because we're going to make selections and cut this out almost. Okay, so sometimes sequence can be important. Here is not that important because all our subjects, you know, we intentionally place them with a lot of distance. Okay, now let's get started with the editing part. All right, so this whole editing process involves 3 steps. Okay, the first, and all 3 are related to the selections because ultimately everything has got to do with selection. But what you're going to find out is this is not as tough as that miniature edit selection. This is going to be very, very fast and easy. But even within that, okay, there are 3 phases. One will be, first we'll just make very quick and rough cuts, right? Rough selections. Okay, that'll just be to get the entire scene proper, like getting all the clones in one shot. There's going to be a second phase where we're going to slightly make that selection better, the edges better. And finally, there'll be a third phase where we'll absolutely perfect all the selection. So 3 phases. So let's start with the first phase. So we are on the laptop shot here. So what we're going to do here is we just have to make a quick selection around it, like just a quick selection around the subject. Now, the best tool to quickly make a selection is not the quick select tool, because it still takes time. You can just take the lasso tool, because this is a very rough selection. Just be near the subject's boundary, okay, like this. Obviously, you can't be too exact with this. Whoops, my mouse just slipped actually. Yeah, but something like this. You're just trying to be around the subject. That's not too tough, right? So you can just like go something like this. Okay, we have to definitely take the chair in, because in the empty shot, if you remember, the chair had moved. So we have to make sure that the chair has been taken properly into the picture, okay? So now that we've got this selection, all we have to do is just open up with this selection like this, just open up the layer mask. So just see what happens when you have a selection and you open up a layer mask, just see what happens. Okay, now can you see the shocked layer got revealed, right? Because what happened is that the shocked layer is beneath this, okay? Now, whenever you have a selection and you open up a layer mask, what happens is the part that was selected automatically gets filled with white, okay? And the remaining layer gets filled with black. That means the white part was showing from the laptop layer, and the black part is showing the layer beneath, which is the shocked layer in which this subject is there. And we can just keep on continuing this process, because then we will just keep moving down and down like this. Okay, so again, the moment you had a selection and you open up the layer mask, the selection automatically gets filled with white, because Photoshop is assuming, okay, Kush wants to keep this selection and eliminate everything else. So let's fill everything else with black. So again, I'm just explaining a lot, because if you're seeing layer masking for the first time, it can just be a bit tough to understand, okay? But just look at this thumbnail and you'll get an idea that yes, this white part is this, okay? Now we're going to go and do the same thing. So we're going to go to the shock layer and we just are going to roughly select the figure. Okay, so and there are going to be some imperfections right now. You can see that light stand being seen and some other things. All of that will come later. We're going to refine these things later on. Okay, right now we're just doing a basic selection. So again, we're going to be doing the same thing this time. So this time the horns layer has got revealed, right? But can you now notice something in the horns layer, which is that this is actually hidden by this, right? And that's because this laptop layer, right? We have kind of made a rough selection. So this laptop layer is on top. Even this part here. So if I just zoom in, okay, even this part here is a part of the selection, right? For the laptop layer. That's why this layer is being hidden underneath that. So later on, once we refine this selection, this will come on top. Okay, so, and for this, we will just have to slightly be accurate with our selections, as you're going to see later on. It's just going to be slightly more challenging than these selections. Okay, that's because it is one of those areas where there's a bit of intersection between the two clones, but this is not going to be tough. Okay, you can also see there is a bit of change in exposure between the selections. We're all going to correct that later on. Right now, we're just making the rough selections. So right now, let's make the selection for the horns layer also. So we know that it's, even though we can't see this, but we know that yes, this is up to like something like this, right? Then we can do the same thing. So that is going to come into effect later on once we start removing this initial selection. So now you can see we are seeing the selection, okay, which is sleeping floor. So let's make a quick selection of this. Okay. And now can do the same thing. Now finally we'll get this one. Now you can see that there's a bit of an issue here, which we're going to solve. And finally on the sleeping couch one, let's just do this. Yes, I'm just going to be slightly careful here. Like I said, this is the rough one, so it's okay. And okay, also can you notice that you're seeing a bit of these transparent areas? That's because in one of the shots, I remember, and I think I mentioned this during the shoot, the tripod moved, okay? I think that was the last shot. And because of that, when it came to the alignment, we have lost a bit of the area. So that's okay. It's very less. We're just going to crop it at the end. It's going to cause some problems like this. You can see here. Okay, that's not a problem. This all is going to get cropped. As long as the main clone, the main body of the clone is there, that's okay. All right. So this is the first phase. Like we just cut out very rough selections here. Now let's go to the second phase. We'll try to improve these selections a bit. All right, so now when it comes to the second phase, there are two things that you have to keep in mind, okay, in order to improve the selection. One is if I zoom in, okay, you can start to see these things, right? This is because there's a difference in exposure between both the images that even though we were using the similar settings, you've already seen throughout this course that can happen sometimes because of the way the light bounces when the subject has moved somewhere else. Okay, so that's always going to happen. Okay, you can't really always control that. So one is we have to take care of these exposures. Second, right now, because we've used the lasso tool, these edges are very, very defined, right? Definite. So you can see that these are not soft edges. They are not like merging into one another. So we're going to solve these two things. So both exposure as well as these soft edges is what we're going to be correcting. Okay. So here's how you do this process. What we're going to do right now is let's start with the first one. I'm going to zoom out. There's a little trick to this, which is we can better see this selection area. Because right now it's tough to see where exactly the edges are. And in order to do that, what you do is you select the layer mask, because remember that's where the selection is. So just click on the layer mask for each layer. So right now we're on the laptop one. So I've just selected this layer mask here. And then you're going to hit the / key, okay? The key that is usually below backspace and above enter. And the moment you do that, just see. Can you see? It's actually showing us what is the white part inside this layer mask and what is the black part. The black part is being represented by this red overlay, and the white part, which is basically the selection, the rough selection that we made with the lasso tool, is being represented here. This is clean. So this is our selection. You can see the boundary of it is very defined. This is what now you can also see was causing the problem. Remember, we could see half of this light stand. That's because this selection was making that visible. Now we will be able to hide it. So what we're going to do here is we basically have to just, run this, make it closer, and definitely on all the edges, we have to make sure that we use a soft brush to paint which color? Black color. Okay? Because we want to take away from this. So when you paint with black, what's going to happen is it's going to take away and it's going to make the selection smaller in size, which is what we want, and also at the same time is going to soften the edges. So just see, if I select a paintbrush, choose black, make sure that the hardness is 0, okay, because this time we want to take away from the definite edges. Make sure the layer mask is selected, black is selected. I'm going to increase the size slightly, and what I want is I want to do this so that ultimately you don't see that transition, that sharp transition which we were seeing. Also, I want to get as close to this subject as possible to eliminate any errors like that. Can you see the moment I ran black on it, that light stand disappeared? Why? Because now it's not a part of the selection. So it's just like painting black. It's just that you're seeing that, you've pressed that / key, so you're seeing this. Okay, it's just easier to visualize. That's all. So now you can see that the moment I do this, it's bringing something back. So the moment you notice something like this, okay, what is happening here is you basically, since you're removing this from the selection, you're painting black, okay, something from this layer, the shock layer, is being seen now, which we don't want. So the moment you see something else from another layer, switch this over to white. Now, for a long time, I've been going to this palette, right? I deliberately didn't tell you a shortcut, which is to switch between black and white because it was not needed at that time, but here it might be needed. And this shortcut is, okay, so the first shortcut is if you press the D key, okay, it just makes this palette black and white. So you get both the colors and you can switch anytime then by using X like this. So then you don't have to open the palette every time, okay? If you don't want to do it right now, if you want to stick to the palette one, perfectly fine. Okay, so right now I'm going to select white like this, and I just want to take away from this. Okay, and again you can see, so that's why this rule is good, because now I don't have to open it again, because I know I need to paint black. I need to paint white. Okay, so sometimes these issues can come here. So we're going to continue with black now. Sorry, so black, and just run it through So again, trying to be as close, for example, that I don't want to eat up the leg here, right? So unnecessarily that selection should not be taken into account. And finally, let's do this. Later on, we will have to refine this because now can you see now, if I do this, we're taking away from the selection and this starts to come. So ultimately in the third phase, we'll do it perfectly. Right now this is the second phase. Okay, we're still trying to get close to perfect. Right now we're not under the pressure of making this perfect. Do that in the third step. Right now, the whole task was just to smoothen this out. Now, if I again press the backslash key, just see. Right now, this looks pretty good. If still you notice any changes, okay, and we'll look at that towards the end. If there's still any problems, we can always open up a brightness adjustment function and change the exposure a bit till it merges together. In fact, we're going to be doing it for the second layer here because there's a lot of difference. So let's do that.